Welcome to today's Automotive Fleet webinar, Fleet Strategy 2026, How to Navigate Uncertainty Without Adding Cost, presented by Merchants Fleet. I'm Shelley Mika, contributing writer for Automotive Fleet, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the webinar, and we will try to address those all during the Q&A. But if we don't get to yours, rest assured, we will follow up via email with a response after the event. Today, I'm joined by two fantastic guests from Merchants Fleet, Senior Fleet Consultant Landon McKay and Fleet Share Manager Joe Coffey. Landon, let's start with you. Tell us about your role and give us a high-level overview of how you work with fleets.
Yeah. So I'm a strategic consultant, and with that, I work with fleets to develop strategies, help enact any cost savings measures. My main focus is let's look at your fleet. How can we drive down cost, manage TCO, and really that bottom line impact for fleets.
Love that. That's so important. Joe, tell us a little bit about you.
Afternoon. Joe Coffey, manager of Fleet Share Operations. I have 7 years in the fleet industry, all at Merchants Fleet. I manage day-to-day operations for our Merchants Fleet Share product, as well as I lead strategic initiatives to bolster the product as well. In addition, in fleets, I meet with fleet managers on occasion to kind of discuss TCO solutions by way of optimizing their fleet utilization, in most cases through our Fleet Share product.
Great. Thanks so much for those introductions. Let's go to slide 3 and get started. So today we're here to learn about how to navigate uncertainty. So let's start off by talking about what that means for fleets today. What are some of your fleet customers saying about the instability of the current environment?
Yeah, I think as you're looking at the slide, the unpredictability of tariffs, obviously, number one, that's something we've been trying to manage with our fleets. It has a huge impact on cost. And as the tariffs were illegal in February 2026, but then the administration also replaced that with Section 122. Tariffs went up to 15% from there. That's still being challenged in court. You've also had OEMs, if fleets are looking for cost reduction, the OEMs had significant tariff refunds on their Q1 earnings, but those refunds are being used to offset rising commodity costs, right, from the Iran conflict. That's been such a huge impact for all of our fleets, but those refunds are not being passed through to buyers. So as far as looking for any cost reductions in that regard, customers should not plan on pricing relief. Prices will probably go up because you also have something called Section 232, the steel and aluminum tariffs, and that's at 50%. And that itself is going to remain fully in place regardless of any court rulings. And that's going to, again, flow through that vehicle cost. You also have the uncertainty. I'm just going to run through this because these are huge impacts for fleet, and these are things that are top of mind for our fleets too. So you have the USMCA, which is the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, and that is set to review in July of 2026, so this year. The extension of that is most likely, but there's going to be tighter rules of origin, Chinese content restrictions, stronger labor enforcement. You have all the OEMs backing that, and it's probable that there will be an extension. But you also have that Section 122. Those surcharges also expire around 2026, right when the negotiations start. So if any of those negotiations kind of fall through or there's delays, there's no tariff backstop. So again, it's kind of this perpetual unpredictable cost that we're looking at. So I think for fleet managers in that regard, it's more of a supply chain story and not just a trade policy story, because you have lead times, pricing, and allocation decisions made by AMs in Q3, Q4 will shape where that USMCA negotiations stand. I think all these tariffs have been a huge concern, adding cost across the board. And again, as we've said, future state, it's probably going to maintain in some level, driving up cost. You also have the shifting regulations. So I'm sure a lot of people are aware of the EPA, the 2027 low NOx rule, that starting in January of 2027. So that will include all heavy duty class 7 to 8 diesel engines. They have to meet a 82.5% stricter NOx standard. And the cost impact, again, we're talking about cost impact of what does this mean for me as a fleet manager? Cost impact is about 8,000 to 15,000 per unit in new hardware alone. So that's a substantial increase that we're looking to go forward. And that's not going anywhere. So OEMs are also responding in real time with that. So Isuzu has announced it will not have compliant diesel N series in 2027. Cummins has delayed its X15 launch and all these other things. So for fleet managers too, these regulatory shifts create three immediate risks. So unplanned cost increases, and if vehicles slip in that 2027 build dates, you have reduced upfit flexibility from added treatment, hardware weight and space. You have also the technology reliability uncertainty, right? With all this new technology, is it going to work? Is it not? So again, we're recommending, if you're impacted by this too, the window to act is 2026 with the pricing and the technology. It's open now. Act now. Again, you also have the volatile costs of maintenance. Again, the tariffs impact all of this too. You have tariffs on parts, the steel, everything else, inflating costs. Outside of that, maintenance cost has far outpaced inflation year over year. So that's never going down because you also have skilled labor. It's hard to come by. Nothing on the horizon is going to be driving that down. So, and we've seen a lot of fleets, again, and we'll talk about it later, too, holding on to assets, especially coming out of COVID. We have a lot of holding on to our cycle parameters have changed. We're not cycling as much, holding on to more spares. So you have a lot more aged asset, pent up demand for replacement, right? So we're seeing a lot of maintenance cost increases. And again, compounding it with that, it's fuel. You have all these older assets, lower MPGs. Fuel prices were declining, but again, with the current conflict, we've seen a 50% increase in that spend there. So we have vehicle cost increasing, fuel spend increasing across the board. It's been a huge impact for our fleets.
Well, and as we know, fleet budgets don't always go up accordingly for all of these circumstances, right?
That's true.
Yeah, unfortunately. So, what's your advice to keep costs in check in this environment? What should fleets be looking at now to navigate this type of uncertainty?
Yeah, I think as we said, with cost increasing, act now. Look at replacing now. Be more proactive because there's a lot of uncertainty coming into 2027. Usually OEMs are not going to be passing more dollars over. And we've seen from Toyota, other manufacturers too. They're planning to increase cost, and uh, I think acting now to forego future uncertainty is key. Also with fuel, the monitoring driver behavior. There's ways that you can act now and using technology, reporting. You have fuel fraud. Are you also overfleeting your fleet? We talked about holding on to vehicles. Are you overfleeting? Are you also holding costs in those vehicles? You could cycle those vehicles out. Newer, more fuel efficient vehicles, especially. Those are kind of the key uh, metrics and key opportunities that we have for our fleet. Again, all these things are compounding. A lot of it is we've also been holding on to these vehicles for an exorbitant period of time, and we have an opportunity now to maybe focus on how do we drive those costs down.
Yeah, it's like all of the vehicles that people are hanging on to longer. At some point, you're increasing your TCO, right? Um, so is total cost of ownership kind of one of those things that fleets should be taking a harder look at right now?
I mean, yes, I think it's always obviously every fleet is looking at how do we improve total cost of ownership, and you have budgetary constraints. You have all these things, and that's our job is to look for ways and opportunities again when with those confines, or make the case to say, hey, let's increase our capex budget because you have all this variable spend, right? Let's look at replacing vehicles. Let's look at how does that outweigh, and not just TCO from a static standpoint, but what does that look like for your fleet? And again, for TCO, we're looking at. I think it's important to look at not just an individual unit. You're looking really at what's the TCO for the fleet? What's the macro level, right?
Yeah. Let's actually go to
Um,
slide 4 because that kind of leads us into um, a discussion of like how operational TCO is typically calculated. And I think you guys have a really unique perspective on how we can kind of modernize the way we look at those things. So didn't mean to interrupt you, but just wanted to
oh no,
word there.
no. I think if you're looking at fuel maintenance, fuel is of course an impact, and there's ways that you can control it. As I said, monitoring driver behavior, is there fuel fraud, using technology also to really hone in on what's the opportunity in the fleet, idling, driving that down, uh, the standard ways to do that. It's a huge factor. Maintenance, again, with uncertainty, holding on to longer assets. Again, as we said, maintenance cost is not going down. It will never go down. So, how can we get those vehicles out of the fleet and replace it with a lower maintenance cost vehicle? Again, that's going to increase your capex spend, but you're also going to have you have with maintenance uncertainty, downtime, all of those things as a metric, and that's also a factor of when we're looking at operational TCO. What's the downtime factor for that too? Because disruptions in business operations, that has a dramatic impact when it comes to maintenance. You're also potentially increasing rentals, etc. So when we're looking at TCO, though, oftentimes when we're getting in the weeds, we're looking at individual vehicles, replace it, looking at we do optimal replacement. We're looking at what does it look like as a budget if we're adhering to our replacement standard. What does that operational TCO for the fleet look like over 5 years, right? And oftentimes when we're looking at that, we're saying if we're also adhering to a replacement cadence that uh, gets those vehicles out, those high maintenance vehicles that we keep dumping money into on a regular basis as maintenance starts to increase year over year, we see a decrease in that overall operational TCO. So we're level setting, our lease spend, better control of that fuel and maintenance costs because we're not hitting peaks. We're optimizing our MPG. We're optimizing that maintenance. But I think again, as we're looking at a macro level, you're looking at again, what's the opportunity uh, for the fleet itself, right? From a
Right.
depreciation standpoint, too, that's a huge factor. Oftentimes, it's 36% potentially of our overall TCO. So if we're holding on to the vehicles for an extended period of time, I think that has a huge impact because you're not getting the same value for those vehicles. Honing in on what's the right time to replace, right? Outside of this, again, how are a key driver for all of this, and we'll talk about this again, is utilization, right? So, how are we utilizing our vehicles? Are we utilizing those vehicles correctly? Because that's a way that we can say, how do you manage these costs without negotiating better rates, factory order markdowns, et cetera? All of those other things involved with fleet and TCO. Really, it's a matter of doing more with less, and that's where we talk about optimizing the utilization for your fleet, right?
Yeah, let's go to slide 5 and talk a little bit more about utilization. I really like what you say about how, you know, we get very focused on dialing into what's the TCO for one vehicle, and we look at all these factors that relate to that. But then once we've got all our hands around all of those things, what else is there? And in walks utilization. It's sort of this new it factor when, like you said, you're talking about macro management of the fleet. So not just looking at one vehicle, but looking at, how they're all being used. So, yeah, let's talk more about utilization and like what happens when it's too high, what happens when it's too low, and why is it important to get it right?
Yeah, I think this has been a huge factor for a lot of the fleets that I've been working with because again, as we talked about, they're holding on to vehicles too long, or they have too many vehicles, they have too many spares, or um, so what is the right factor? Because you're still having to pay something for those vehicles. You have to maintain those vehicles. You have insurance costs also on those vehicles that they also don't consider, right?
I think a lot of
One
times
client,
people think like if it's not being used, I'm not spending
I'm not.
money on fuel or but you're still there's a lot of cost associated with idle vehicles.
There's still a cost, and you also have, for some of these vehicles, whether you're not using them too, you have trapped equity in those vehicles that you could leverage. So getting
Yeah.
that amount right helps, and that again factors into the overall macro TCO of the fleet. Um, you have fleets that are potentially underfleeted, so utilization's too high. They're running into higher maintenance costs quickly, uh, which again is a factor of how do you manage that? Are our drivers uh, efficient? Are our drivers doing the most they can? Balancing that windshield time. We talk about windshield time. Are they doing jobs, doing, producing revenue for the fleet, mitigating that maintenance spend? And then if it's too low, you have fixed costs that are then spread over a less amount of miles, and then that again is going to inflate your TCO. So finding that balance, we found is really key to managing. Again, it's another factor of that operational TCO, right?
Yeah.
Finding the right, not only the right vehicle, but the right use of the vehicle and the right amount of use for that vehicle.
Yeah, and what's so nice about that is that um, when you are dialing in and getting that right, you're freeing up capital that can be used to kind of offset some of these uncertain cost factors that we talked about in the beginning, right?
100%. So I think when you show that and you see, okay, this is the right utilization for the vehicle, these are underutilized assets, or these are overutilized assets, right? You're really honing in on um, on managing that TCO, hopefully lowering that TCO as well. Getting and the driver is what's our cost per mile and how can we improve that cost per mile. That's that's a prime factor for all of our fleets and how we want to measure them, right? Are we improving their overall cost per mile? And a key metric of that is, yeah, fuel maintenance, depreciation, downtime as an out, as a potential factor too. But it's really utilization as a whole. Are we
Yeah,
optimizing our fleet to the best of our ability?
that makes perfect sense. Yeah, let's go to slide 6 because if I'm sitting in the audience, I'm thinking, great, how do I do that? So let's talk about some of the strategies that fleet managers can use to improve utilization. Like, what are some of the moves they can make to get this right?
Sure. So many industries, so many companies operate on a one-to-one driver fleet for all their vehicles, depending on what industry they're in. Sometimes that's required. There's also room to look into it and see what opportunities there are to minimize the amount of vehicles you might have out there. With that, you take pool vehicles into consideration. Uh, Take a look at it from like a geographic standpoint, where you may have an opportunity if you have enough people in the same general area, you can utilize the pool vehicle concept and reduce the amount of vehicles you have in your fleet by having the drivers share those vehicles there. In the same aspect, if you have multiple shifts, if you run on a shift structure, there's the opportunity there to move into the shift structure where you share again the same vehicles, reduce the amount of vehicles that are in your total fleet. Um, Besides that, you can kind of transfer around vehicles to high demand locations. There's also seasonality that comes into consideration throughout like times of the year. Again, depending on the industry a company may be in, you might have peak periods, high demand periods, maybe around the holidays towards the end of the year, or any other time during the year, where you have to move vehicles to a particular location where others don't need them as much. Instead of just having the one-to-one driver fleet, it creates the opportunity to move vehicles around and really utilize and optimize the utilization of the fleet that you have. Um,
Yeah.
Besides that, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I think and I think a few of these too. I mean, these are strategies that I've enacted with a few of my fleet. I think better management of pool vehicles. I had a client that was running into a lot of rentals, far outpacing their client benchmarks. And a lot of that was, how do you manage these vehicles? You have some spares here, some spares over there. How can you better allocate and have inventory management over those, so you can then move those vehicles instead of getting, and over a quarter they drop their, you know their from a to quarter comparison, they drop their rental spend by $300,000, which is a phenomenal story. And also the rental vehicle equipment, that's a huge aspect of, are you carrying a lease over a term where you're not using that vehicle? Can you again use a short-term rental over that time frame? And I had another fleet landscaping business, and they saved several $1 million by, hey, we're going to rent these 200 vehicles instead of doing a long-term lease, for example. So there's different strategies that you can act. Again, improving utilization through different means and strategies that will pay dividends for your fleet.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I always think about anytime I see an idling vehicle, I think, oh, it's wasting money. But also idle vehicles are wasting money. You know, the vehicles that you're not using properly, those are costing you. And yeah, you can either move them around, sell them off, and take back that investment in a way, right?
Yeah, it's kind of the equity capture of those vehicles. Plus, there are other costs, right? And then you run into situations where now you're holding on to the vehicle for too long, and again, it's that depreciation curve that we're looking at. And when we're doing optimal replacement too, we're looking at, where do those factors intersect? The maintenance and the fuel, and but the depreciation as well, right? What's the optimal useful life of that vehicle? And too often times we're holding on to vehicles maybe too long, or we're not utilizing those vehicles correctly. How
Yeah.
can we improve that? Again, looking at a macro level for TCO for the fleet, that's the focus of all of that.
Yeah. Let's go on to slide 7. So technology tends to make most things easier. How can technology be used to make utilization easier and getting that right? Um, I can see how it could be daunting to say, like, yeah, I can move vehicles around, but like, how do I figure out which vehicles to move, or, which vehicles could be, combined by two users or pooled, or what have you? How does technology make that a little bit easier?
Sure. So yeah, technology creates two things that are the most important part of this: visibility and organization. Organization one, a lot of operations, depending on what industry anyone's in, there's always something run on a spreadsheet that really shouldn't be. In this case, we're looking at a fleet organization bringing something into a platform or dashboard away from that spreadsheet. Just creates that visibility and moves things into a kind of a centralized location where you can see it all very easily and really decipher the data you're seeing in front of you. Again, with this dashboards, you have the ability to kind of see, where vehicles might be underutilized, where they might be overutilized, where you really don't need them. In addition to that, with it all in one place, you have the ability to kind of look at historical data and the patterns you see throughout the year, and with a kind of plan ahead. I know, going back to the seasonality aspect of it, it's really a huge part of it. Like last mile space, for a great example, they have certain peak periods throughout the year where they have to plan ahead of it many months ahead of time. They use the previous data from several years before that because they have their information all kind of in one place. And they can know when they need to ramp up vehicles, either on a short-term basis to add more in, or where to move them around to, and to remove them from, because they are anticipating higher volume in certain areas. Yeah, so in addition to that, you have kind of telematics too, which is a main driver from technology. With the telematics, you kind of have the ability to like really monitor drivers. Uh, Again, the GPS tracking, kind of see routes are very important right now. The fuel and energy consumption, being able to track that. There might be some areas where you have vehicles that are running longer routes than they really need to be, burning more fuel. You can position those vehicles in a better place. You're not burning as much fuel to accomplish the daily tasks organization might need to do. Uh, Besides that, you can kind of track vehicle preventative maintenance along with the other items through telematics. And just like you're tracking to kind of volume history in the peak periods, you can track maintenance cycles and identify when there's going to be large maintenance cycles coming up. If you have a large number of vehicles that are all due for an oil change around the same time, you can plan ahead, execute, and decrease that vehicle downtime to get vehicles back out on the road as quickly as possible. And then kind of the last point there is automation in general. As we're moving into kind of a world of AI, it's kind of a top of mind for everybody, right?
Right.
With automation coming out of kind of the technology space, you can really spend less time and money and man hours and worrying about a fleet. If you centralize those operations with use of technology, you can optimize your productivity by a great extent, not have to worry about the location basis, look at it from a large holistic view, identify kind of mileage based maintenance alerts and actions, all driven by when a trigger is hit through the automation and telematics, all speaking to each other. And probably most importantly, take the manual work out of a fleet manager's hands. You can really make it seem like a 24-hour solution to allow drivers to secure vehicles for however long they need them, whether it be a day, a week, a month. Using technology in that aspect can really increase utilization and provide greater productivity on everyone's end, especially the fleet managers.
Yeah, gotta love that, right? More hours in the day. What tool do you guys specifically use utilization wise at Merchants Fleet?
Sure. So we use our product called Fleet Share.
Okay.
Correct. So Fleet Share is so I describe it as our best-in-class app-based fleet optimization and key management platform. What it essentially does, it creates centralized visibility and control to reduce downtime and improve efficiency. Uh, really, for a fleet manager standpoint, it allows for it is an adjustable reservation platform. Key management. There's also ability to have keyless in there as well, which is getting more and more popular by the day. The technology is moving along there. There are some issues that go along with keyless, but keys are a tried and true platform as long as you have security and organization to take care of them. Um, the fleet sure does beyond that is it allows the fleet managers to track fuel, the vehicle routes, and daily driver activity. Again, easily identify operational bottlenecks where you have too many vehicles again in one place or don't have enough. Track seasonality during peak periods to be able to move vehicles around or know when you have to add some short-term assets in order to deal with the needs of a certain time or an operation a company might have throughout the year. Um, Specifically, you can look at it from a geographic scale through our kind of, again, best in class operations portal. Uh, and in addition to that, you can kind of see vehicle downtime and reduce vehicle downtime through those automation and the centralization of the fleet. Um, in the simplest sense, it provides a self-service 24-hour reservation platform through an accompanying fleet share app that any driver will use to you, go through the product. And from a fleet manager standpoint, there is the platform that they can see everything through dashboards, through unlimited reports. They're all customizable. And then lastly, of course, there is kind of the security and accountability aspect. Um, if you have drivers sharing a pooled fleet, they might come into an issue where you have a bunch of dings and dents showing up in a vehicle. Through an integrated in-app visual inspection tool, you have the ability to hold drivers accountable and kind of see when damage might have happened to a vehicle, as well as hold the driver accountable and obviously like, create rules in the future based on what you're seeing. And then lastly, of course, there is the less need for kind of the manual intervention of the fleet manager to kind of track keys, operate entirely on a spreadsheet. Moving away from spreadsheets is important in any industry. In this one case, I think we created an opportunity, a product where you can move everything to a centralized location and really increase utilization through all the data and the dashboards at the fingertips of the fleet manager.
Yeah, that sounds like it makes things so much easier. Like when I think about, creating a pool program back in the old days, pre AI, pre all the great technology we have today, it's a lot. and it's you kind of have to look at like, is it worth the time? But now with tools like this and with AI, um, we have an opportunity to create programs like that, but without taking a ton of time to do it, right? Because it's automated, like you said, and you're managing on a dashboard, not an Excel spreadsheet. I personally just am bad at Excel, so things like that make me really happy to hear. Um, well, thanks. Yeah, that's great. So let's go to the next slide. And so when we're using these tools and we're enacting these strategies, what do we see? What are the results of taking these steps? Like, does it take a long time to get utilization right? What kind of benefits should fleets see when they do this?
Right. So no, it doesn't really take a long time to see progress. Payoffs do happen fast in what we've seen, depending on the volume size of the fleet, how many locations might be brought into the platform. You can see results very quickly, whether it be over a month of going through one peak seasonal period. Just to really see, understand, and kind of analyze the data from that time to know what actions you need to take. Now, again, you can take that data and move it into a historical aspect, look at it from the next year or the next peak period you have. Action, again, add more vehicles or move them through your fleet. Because really the idea is to increase that utilization and really reduce the amount of fleet you have, amount of vehicles you have in your fleet, and the overall reducing cost there. Uh, we've seen in a few cases where the number of vehicles have greatly decreased, moving away from a one-to-one vehicle to a driver case, and creating that pool fleet aspect where so many costs go down because you're not having so many vehicles sit. And when vehicles do sit, there's so many issues that can happen when you have batteries going dead, if you have something that's underutilized, where then that creates more maintenance costs. If they're not being utilized enough, whereas again we spoke to it earlier, they're being utilized too much, and you're going way over in your mileage, and really depreciating the value of the vehicle when it comes time to resell.
Yeah, and also thinking about like the driver experience for online reservations. Like it's a way easier process for them too, right? Um, and anytime you can make drivers happier, the better.
Absolutely,
um,
yeah.
yeah, well, let's go on to the next slide and we can look at kind of how this plays out in real life. So let's looking at like that macro model compared to kind of how TCO is traditionally calculated.
Right, sure. So yeah, again, as you can see from the macro model, you have your normal fleet costs and the amount of vehicles you need to operate, where you have your total maintenance that goes into your fleet, as well as the total kind of depreciation of a vehicle. With the fleet share product, it kind of creates again the ability to decrease the size of your fleet, uh, bring on the greater utilization of the vehicles, so that you don't need to keep as many throughout the year and have them sit, accruing costs, letting the value of the vehicles go down, ultimately hurting the company as a whole. Um, I'll say how it kind of works in that aspect is we had a recent client um, just start up with the product, and they had a few needs that were, for example, they wanted to create organization, kind of centralize their operations, create a key management system, track the vehicle maintenance, and really instill automation into their day-to-day operations so that they weren't worrying about the little things that take up way more time than you think they would, and create the issues that a fleet manager might go through every single day. What we were able to do is over kind of several discovery meetings is we were able to meet with them, understand exactly what they want, to listen to those key points I just laid out. And with it, we were able to design an operations portal, fit exactly their needs, see the dashboards, reports, items they really needed, to kind of understand where they could maybe have more vehicles or less vehicles, including with the telematics and all those items that help them see where they can kind of increased utilization and really accomplish what they were trying to do. It is more recent. They were launched. There was still more to be seen, but from early on results, we are seeing great things and hearing it all back. The total experience is great, especially for the drivers as you laid out, where it is 24/7 self-automated, completely free, as long as you're within the FleetShare app. Where they can kind of control every aspect of the operation. It is seamless from a driver's point of view.
Yeah, that's great. And I think the thing that really stands out to me on this slide is that um, the fleet output is the same on both sides, but the total cost is far lower, over $1 million less. And you're still getting the same output from your fleet, which is important. So, yeah, I can't imagine a fleet manager that wouldn't like to reduce costs, but keeping productivity the same or better, even. So,
Yeah, I think that's the goal. And what we talked about earlier is it's doing less with more and leveraging the technology and everything else is that's the goal is to do, especially with, as we talked about earlier, the market uncertainty, increasing of costs, the variable costs across the board. How can we do less with more? Right.
yeah, exactly. Anything else you guys want to add before we jump into our Q&A? I'm excited to
I
see
don't
what we
think so.
have here. All right. Well, let's get started on that then. Um, First question coming in: how does improving utilization differ for small fleets versus large fleets?
Sure, so I can
Okay,
take that.
so you can jump in if you want, or I can jump in stuff. I
Sure.
think
Yeah, yeah. Again, the utilization in a small fleet versus large fleet. If you have multiple locations with like small number of vehicles, there's less to look at. There is still data there where you can move it around in a small fleet. But if you're looking at a larger fleet, could be potentially multiple locations, a much higher volume of vehicles, where it's much more complicated to improve utilization unless you have a tool in front of you that makes it easy, digest the information, and kind of shows it in a way that is like an interactive dashboard, for instance, to be able to kind of see what that shows you, and be able to make the proper moves to again move vehicles around or add or decrease in the fleet.
That makes sense. Kind of in a similar vein, do utilization strategies differ by industry?
Yeah, I think we've talked about that a little bit, and Joe, you can chime in here too. But if we're looking at seasonal industries, I think that's a huge variance that we've seen. You have a lot of downtime potentially in the winter months. Um, you know, you have also certain fleets, delivery fleets, pharma fleets. They're pretty consistent and they're on the 1-to-1 ratio. But a lot of service industry fleets, might vary. It might also depend upon uh, region, what's the route, etc. But I think it's there's a big difference in some of the service industry fleets where, and as we talked about too, it gets more complicated when we're looking at utilization, understanding utilization. How can we again leverage technology to understand how we're using that fleet? Because we talked about before, we want to manage that windshield time for our drivers. We want them to generate revenue and do as many jobs as they can, and also we don't want them sitting on the ground either.
Yeah, exactly. Um, okay. What is the ROI on a utilization technology solution? So, like, what are you guys seeing with Fleet Share in terms of ROI?
Sure. So the ROI can again it varies greatly by total volume of the fleet as well as how many locations. We've had a few again different cases where depending on how large the fleet was or how many locations they were kind of focused in or geographically across the country or area of the country. It really depended kind of what that return was. Really, the greatest thing about it was the use of the technology and creating much more seamless, again, centralized operations create an ROI of their own, where you're taking all the day-to-day work out of the hands of like a central fleet manager, or multiple fleet managers to make it so much easier and seamless from their end there. As far as again, the monetary value of an ROI, you actually have to look at it again like from the varying case of how big the fleet is and what actions have been taken in order to increase the utilization. The data is kind of there in front of you to see what actions should be taken, where you might need to move vehicles, add them to again. But the answer there is really dependent on the total volume of the fleet there.
Sure. Next one is, how long does it take to implement a utilization strategy? And I'm sure that varies by fleet size too, but if you were to ballpark it,
Sure. So in time, it can be done essentially pretty quickly, depending, like you said, definitely on the fleet size of are you dealing with here. Um, but when it comes time to say, we kind of got the company that I was speaking to earlier up and running, within a month, depending on after the initial kind of reach out, and we heard the issues they had, and we kind of brought the solutions to the table that they're looking for. So that is kind of in their hands now to see, and they can obviously action on it and execute the appropriate moves in order to kind of see the great utilization as they see fit. But it can be definitely essentially very quick in order to kind of get that strategy up and moving.
um, this is, I know we talked about ROI. This is a little bit of a different question, but how soon can fleets expect to see results from implementing a utilization strategy?
Sure. So, like again, the results and seeing where those kind of where they're at and how long it's going to take to see them depends on the volume of the fleet. And again, like the actions you can take from the data that is presented in front of you as a fleet manager. You can see where, again, the vehicles where they need to be at, or you can add them in. Um, and that, I've seen in some cases it takes several months. In one case, we have several years in order to see the kind of a macro solution and like proven results uh, over time. Now there are incremental wins on the way there. Now to say it takes a year to get there, but if you're looking at a massive operation, it can definitely take some time in order to see the ultimate goal you're trying to get to.
Sure. How does this is just my own question. As a fleet grows intentionally, how do fleets ensure that their utilization strategies are still working? Like, does your tool kind of allow for that and adapt accordingly, or how does that work?
Yeah, definitely. So we've been able to grow one client in particular very seamlessly over some time. The ability to add in new locations, add in unlimited amount of vehicles is essentially very easy, very seamless. And the beauty of it is I never worry about volume of vehicles because the more you add in, it's all along the same playbook where no matter how many you're adding in, nothing really changes as far as the day to day and the operational standpoint you're looking at. I think again, most importantly, the tool really creates that ability to add in however many vehicles, how many drivers, how many locations, and then really how many projects you're trying to execute using this data. It makes it really seamless and kind of funnels it all into one easy place.
And am I right in thinking that, the data that you're seeing in the platform is informing how much your fleet might need to grow? Is that accurate?
Absolutely, yeah. Um, with the dashboards available and reports kind of at the fingertips of the fleet manager, they're able to see exactly where that need's going to be without a doubt.
Yeah, that's great. I'll get back to audience questions now. um, how important is technology when implementing a utilization strategy?
I'd say extremely important. Absolutely. Because again, there's the visibility and the organization, the two main things that I think come in handy and are most important when you're kind of dealing with utilization. if you don't have everything in one neat space, as opposed to working out of a spreadsheet or maybe even like a slightly more a capable operation, uh, it creates so many issues that down the line where things get lost, whether it be physical or you're looking at a vehicle on a page. Uh, Having the technology and the ability to move everything into one single place, seeing the telematic data come through, um, and then having kind of autonomous actions from kind of the day-to-day happenings. For example, if a driver has the ability to report if there is an issue with the vehicle, and then again, autonomously, the system can prevent the vehicle from being used again, report it to the fleet manager so they know, or even go the extent of scheduling it right with a mate's provider. All the information is kind of all those abilities are kind of at the fingertips when you're thinking of technology, and all those items save a tremendous amount of downtime on the vehicle and the time of the fleet manager in their day to day.
I imagine too that if, some drivers might not be super excited to lose a vehicle, right? Or to shift over to a pooled vehicle. I imagine that, fleet managers making these decisions could share that data and say, hey, here's why. Like this, we didn't just do this like to you. This is a strategic choice that is beneficial for the company. Do you see fleet share customers um, sharing that data either with drivers or leadership? And I imagine it would also help increase kind of their value as a fleet manager to say, hey, I'm working on these projects that really help our bottom line.
Yeah, yeah, without doubt, it definitely kind of increase the value of the fleet manager, what they're bringing to the table by kind of potentially installing this capability. To your point again, that the one-to-one vehicle driver relationship has it's in so many industries. You see it all across the board of how companies operate. Um, with how the geopolitical landscape, general rising costs, everything as we laid out before. Um, Certain actions kind of need to be taken in some cases for the bottom line essentially in order to save costs. If it comes down to installing a pool solution, that might be what companies lean on in order to save those costs that some need.
And that kind of leads into the next question that I'm looking at here. How does improving utilization help fleets be more resilient?
Definitely. And again, I think along the line of resiliency, you're looking at the kind of historical data throughout the year, knowing when to uh, bring more vehicles in to a fleet in order to accomplish and kind of deal with all the issues. Um, and during the peak periods that a company might see throughout the year, where they need the higher driver count, higher vehicle count. On the resiliency front, again, you can kind of see from the maintenance aspect of it, if the vehicles are being utilized, you're not having vehicles sit around collecting dust, getting issues with the battery, mechanically, you name it. Again, mechanical parts get more expensive as well as the downtime they might see in a dealership um, because of an issue that probably couldn't have been avoided. So I think it creates resiliency by kind of going through all those items to really increase that utilization, bring in that technology that how we see the product, and going from there.
I love this question. What is the first step I should take if I want to improve utilization?
Yeah, I think I've said it a few times. Organization and visibility. Number one being organization. If you're not actually looking at a tool, at least start with organization. Um, Again, me personally, anyone else, I think I can relate to this. As I said before, there's something being run on a spreadsheet that shouldn't be. There's so many greater solutions out there that you can operate certain items on. Uh, I would say organization is definitely the first step from what I've seen on an individual perspective. Getting things in the right place. If you're not organized, then you can't execute any projects or initiatives you want to do down the line because something will break or something will be forgotten.
Yeah. I think we have time for two more questions if you guys are up for it. What's your best advice for implementing a utilization strategy?
Sure. So again, from my point of view, we believe our product, the Fleet Share product, is definitely a great opportunity to kind of implement that utilization strategy. Along those lines, again, organization, visibility, create an item, kind of a platform or an operational standpoint where you can look at these vehicles, your entire fleet from a kind of a holistic, high level view, understand where they are, where vehicles are being underutilized, see where they're sitting, um, and kind of collecting dust. And then where you need more vehicles. If you have a high strain of vehicles are being overutilized, they have way too high of mileage throughout the time, especially if they're on a lease. Again, that's going to create a cost on the line. So moving vehicles to the right place and increasing utilization overall, I think will do so.
Okay, last one. Can you offer any other tips for lowering TCO?
I think we've talked about, a lot here. It's, what's the opportunity to control that variable spend? Not only is it getting your optimal cycle in place, but with fuel there's opportunity, with maintenance there's opportunity, but again, with all these variables, you're looking at cost containment, and a lot of that, as we talked about, is utilization, leveraging technology to really understand, right size your fleet, do more with less, if possible, because
Mhm.
that's going to create, especially with all these market uncertainties that we talked about, at the beginning, um, being proactive, again, using technology, being proactive, and then you really right sizing your fleet is probably the best opportunity to lowering that TCO and creating, again, stability. So when market uncertainty hits, you're better positioned and better prepared to absorb those changes.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Well, this has been a great discussion, and I want to thank our audience for submitting such thoughtful questions. We'll wrap it up here. And again, if your question wasn't answered, we will follow up with you individually via email with a response. And yeah, so as we conclude, Joe and Landon, thank you so much for being here today. Um, and to our audience, want to thank you for spending time with us as well. If you'd like to learn more about Merchants Fleet, visit merchantsfleet.com. And again, thank you to you, Landon and Joe, and Merchants Fleet for today's presentation. This webinar will be available on demand on the Automotive Fleet website at automotive-fleet.com. Um, and on behalf of the entire team here at Automotive Fleet and Bobbitt Business Media, thank you all for joining us. We hope to see you again for another Automotive Fleet webinar. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.